Uday.
Hello and welcome to the Thought League, a show which has presented the top thought leaders of the world with their ideas for change. A dozen big ideas over the last few months which are going to be the defining trends for the new decade. As we come to the close of the first season of the Thought League, it's time to also reflect on the top highlights with none other than Cyril Shroff of Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. Cyril Shroff, so good to have you back on the show. And we have discussed so many grand ideas. For you, it's not just the beginning of the new year, but also the beginning of a new decade. What are the top trends which are going to define businesses and our lives?
So, Nisha, firstly, as we come to the end of season one, let me say that it's been a fascinating experience over the last 6 months or so. We've covered such a broad range of ideas. And many of these ideas, I think, are also relevant for answering the question that you just raised about what do I see as the big trends for the next decade. Firstly, I think a decade in today's time and age is a very long time. The decade in this century is like almost like 100 years in the last century. But within that, I see three major trends as we sit here today looking forward. And I'll just briefly touch upon them. Firstly, I see a big global reset arising from global geopolitics and what's happening in the world. The second I see is the accelerated use of technology and all the other business and policy ramifications arising from it. It's a very complex subject. And I think the third one, is the rise of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and themes relating to it. I think these three themes are going to drive a lot of policy, politics, and business in the next decade. And there are always also sub-strands of each one of them. So that's how I see it. And let's explore each one of them in detail.
That's right. And in fact, these are the key themes which have come up. And also you will agree, Cyril Shroff, that, the pandemic situation has really thrown upon us many challenges, which has caused us to really go for a complete reset and a global reset. How do you first of all see India in the midst of all of this?
So before I come to India, let me deal with a few other major countries. So as I look forward, I see the next decade, while China will be very powerful, it will be in chains because of the sort of just the politics of, everybody circling China in terms of how they have responded to its policies. As far as the USA is concerned, I think the worst is over. And in the coming year and in the rest of the decade ahead, I see a massive renewal. I think they have the fundamentals of their values, their spirit of hard work and innovation, and I think America will be fine. As far as UK is concerned, it's hard to tell. It's sitting on the threshold of a lot of uncertainty post-Brexit pangs. So whilst it will have a lot of soft power, I think long-term there are a lot of challenges to be crossed. As far as Europe is concerned, it will need to reinvent itself in the role of the world. And I think more broadly, I think there will be a debate on the role of democracies. And having said that, let me talk of India. I see the rise of India for various reasons. I think demography and the power of our growing economy. I think no matter what happens, I think we are well set on the way to significant growth and importance in the global economy. And even on the world stage, in 2022, we will have the presidency of the G20. I expect to see in the next decade the reform of the WTO. Eventually, I think in this decade, I think India will get a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. And there are other broader geopolitical themes like the Quad as well. So all of this, I think, is going to add up to India becoming an extremely important voice in the world. And it is India's star is on the ascendancy for sure.
That's right. And India, amidst all the geopolitical changes also, and whether we can capitalize on that. If you remember, Cyril Shroff, we had spoken about this with KV Kamath, who had this grand idea of, global reset and India's role in that, and not just global reset, but a mindset reset as well in every direction possible. So it's like a complete overhaul on various fronts. Let's hear out KV Kamath on that big idea of his.
Everybody reset their own minds, whether it was at a personal level or at a corporate level. And so I would think that what defines this reset, as we will keep talking, is the speed at which it has happened, the speed at which it has enveloped us, and at the speed at which we have responded in a positive manner.
All right, so that was KV Kamath talking about the global reset. But the biggest driving force has also been the digital revolution that we have seen. In fact, when it comes to technological advancement, Cyril Shroff, you'll agree with me that the future is much closer to us in this pandemic situation. We have devised many new ways of working with technology while physical movement was a big challenge. How do you see the technological innovation and advancement going forward?
So, Nisha, if there's one lesson from the pandemic, is that it has accelerated the use of technology like nothing else has before. It's almost as they say 2030 has arrived in 2020. And technology going forward is going to have a variety of implications on how we work, how we play, how we learn, on financial services, on how we buy, and just about everything. Linked with it will also be the rise of artificial intelligence, which will permeate a lot of aspects of our life. And it opens up a lot of business possibilities as well, including, how do you really move to a borderless world? If you recollect, Mr. Uday Kotak had spoken about the Office of the World idea, which the foundation of which was really technology, and where you could have India becoming an office of the world with its vast population and technological prowess. Thanks to the internet, it could become in some ways the office of the world. So this was one idea.
That's right.
But even then, there are so many other applications, and I think India will lead in them.
That's right. And since you mentioned about Uday Kotak, let's hear out what he had to say about India being the office of the world and the big ideas that he threw right here on the Thought League.
I think COVID is one of those events which is creating a huge opportunity where it is possible for a person sitting anywhere to provide a service or a delivery in any other part of the world.
All right, so that was Uday Kotak. But if you remember, Cyril Shroff, even Amitabh Kant had spoken about the role of the government and how India can become, or the government can become, the tech garage. What do you think about the role of the government first, and especially in a scenario where big tech companies are now turning out to be more powerful than even the tallest political leaders, as we have seen in the Twitter versus Trump case just recently? How do you see this particular coexistence between the two big powers of the world?
So I'm very fond of that episode with Amitabh Kant, and it was so much so energizing, where he talked about the government becoming the tech garage of the world and India itself becoming a tech garage to the world. And what that really means is that when you partner with the government or work with the government on a technology-oriented project, yes, with 1.2 billion or 1.3 billion people and data of them available, it effectively becomes a tech garage on steroids. So it was a brilliant idea, and I think it's going to play out. Now, to answer your question about the policy implications. So I see three policy implications arising from the accelerated use of technology. The first is the one that you just mentioned, which is the clash of politics and technology, and it's playing out in different forms across the world. Whether it is the move of governments like in the US against big technology and using antitrust laws to break them up.
Yes.
Or it is about really the power of the social media, and this is a theme that is playing out in many other jurisdictions as well, where policy and technology clash. And the third part is, I think, really about the emerging debate on data and privacy. So data is, as they have, as a cliche, is the new oil.
Yes.
And the accelerated use of big data, which is such a valuable asset, and the regulation and policy surrounding it is going to be one of the defining debates of the next decade. And then let me add one more point as well, which is becoming very apparent from the events of the last few days, is that of consumer choice. So it is now not merely about regulation, but I think the consumers, for example, there is a lot of controversy going around the use of certain social media platforms.
Yes.
And a slight change in their policy.
Yes.
And we are seeing this, raging debate on consumer choice. So the consumer has entered front and center as an important, if in a manner of speaking, a regulator of policy.
That's right. In fact, we have entered this new decade and this year with two important controversies and frictions, that is Trump versus Twitter as well as WhatsApp versus Signal. And that's going to be important. But you also mentioned about consumerism and also the use of data and the importance of data. Let's now reflect on what Amitabh Kant had said of India being data rich, and that really opening up many promising potentials for future.
Per capita income might be just 2,000 per capita, but there's a huge potential of Indians earning from their own data which they will generate, and they will have this huge possibility of generating and monetizing their own data. We've shown this through Aadhaar, we've shown this through UPI, and I think this is really the key to India's growth.
All right, so that was Amitabh Kant, but Cyril Shroff, we have also discussed a plethora of, innovations that are lined up, which are going to be big change makers for many kind of businesses, the way the lawyers work, the way the courtrooms work. In fact, Richard Susskind had spoken about the futuristic views on how courts are going to really perform going forward. And also we had artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. What are the key pointers for you as a lawyer when it comes to this particular profession going forward?
So thanks for reminding. Those two are again one of my some of my favorite episodes as well. So the Susskind one was also particularly relevant because it really talks about the future of justice and about how, with the march of technology, the entire idea about courts and justice moving away from the concept of a place where you go to seek justice to a service that is provided by the state is going to be one of the defining developments and movement forward in the area of where technology and law, and particularly access to justice, meet. And we are seeing some of that already with the use of technology for kind of effectively an asynchronous method of delivering justice. I mean, apart from online dispute resolution, you might have read about last week, where the court has asked in a particular case parties to submit their arguments in 2 clips of 15-minute videos each,
yes,
which will be then seen. And that's an example of asynchronous. And this is just the beginning. Think of what will happen going forward.
Right.
Artificial intelligence, I think, is interesting. But if I recollect rightly, Noah Weisberg had kind of put a note of caution that whilst artificial specific intelligence will rise dramatically, we are still a long way off from artificial general intelligence. So I think human beings are safe for now,
yes,
but they will have to significantly reskill themselves in order to be relevant for the new reality where AI will permeate every part of our life.
So basically the debate over man, machine over man dies here, at least at this point. Technology has to really go a long way to really supersede human beings. That's the word coming out. But on that note, we'll slip into a short breather on the Thought League. When we come back, we'll discuss many more grand ideas which are going to be the important defining factors for the decade to come. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are discussing the big ideas for change developed right here on the Thought League with Cyril Shroff. So we are discussing about the many technological advancements as well as the total global reset and the way we do businesses. But Cyril Shroff, there is a huge thrust towards sustainability, and in fact, the pandemic situation has really taught us that. How do you see this particular aspect and this topic really developing going forward?
So, Nisha, this is going to be huge.
Yes.
And the concept of ESG, environment, social, and governance, is not new. It's at least a decade old, if not more. But the emphasis in the last decade has a bit more on governance, on the G of ESG, and parts of E on climate change as well. But as we go forward in this decade, I think we're going to see all the three getting a lot of power and importance. So one of the key lessons from the pandemic has been the importance of climate and the environment. At one level, the pandemic was about nature hitting back at human beings having crossed certain lines. And if we are to preserve this planet for future generations, I think we will have to treat the environment with much care. And this is going to permeate a lot of policy making and business as well. So I expect that there will be a tremendous impetus to the environmental aspects at governmental as well as at individual levels. As far as social is concerned, if I can translate into a human element, one of the key learnings has been the future of human beings in work, the nature of work, the new social contract, which is clear from the manner in which patterns of work are evolving. I think that will change tremendously.
Yes.
With the entry of millennials and Generation Z.
Yes.
And what is more, I think coming to the G part of ESG, I think the biggest game changer is going to be increasing transparency.
Yes.
With so much transparency thanks to technology and social media, there is nowhere to hide. So all entities will have to, whether they like it or not, have to adhere to very high standards of governance, and the standards are going to go up on a daily basis, which will eventually also push us towards ethical wealth creation. So I see the ESG theme as one of the dominant themes of the decade.
That's right. In fact, I'll stop you there, Cyril Shroff, because I now remember the legendary Martin Lipton's talk on the new paradigm. And let's hear him out on the stakeholder primacy going forward and how it's going to get even more pronounced going forward.
Each of the companies and the investors engage with each other to achieve a mutual objective of ESG, corporate social responsibility, all of the things that.
So Martin Lipton made some very important points, Cyril Shroff, but ethical wealth creation that you touched upon, that was also something very important. How do you see that panning out in India?
So they are linked themes as well. And the concept of ethical wealth creation is very integrally linked with our culture and Indian philosophy as well. So I think this will become increasingly more important and relevant because we are entering a decade or two of tremendous wealth creation in India, and it's going to be sustainable and it's going to sort of remain rock solid only if its foundations are based on ethics and trust. So this is going to be a defining theme, and it's also going to define many relationships. The relationship between the state and the citizen, the state and the business. It's going to have tremendous relevance to the role of free markets, because you cannot have closed markets and imperfect markets and still talk of ethical wealth creation. So it's going to have an impact in terms of how our antitrust and competition law regimes evolve in order to encourage more and more free competition and or even hostile takeovers of companies, because all of these factors which are part of the policy environment eventually create for a more transparent framework and the increasing importance of ethics and sticking to a broadly a rule of law kind of righteous behavior. So these themes flow, they're all kind of linked sister themes.
That's right. And in fact, market forces are going to be the watchdogs going forward, and free market forces should really define that ethical wealth creation in any society, is what Krishnamurthy Subramanian had spoken about. Let's hear him out on that.
Ethics and wealth creation have to come together by marrying the power of markets with that of the hand of trust.
All right, so that is one of the big trends that is really picking up. But finally, as we end this particular episode, how do you see the highlights and the big trends emerging for this particular year, which are going to be the big disruptors of future?
Thanks, Nisha. In closing, so firstly for 2021, I would suggest that we see it really not as a 12-month period, but more like an 18-20-month period. For a variety of reasons. I think the first 6 to 8 months are going to be all about vaccine. And it's going to be about impact of lifting of the moratorium on businesses, which will get over in March. And also the challenges about coming back to work. So it's not really a normal period. Then the period 12 to 15 months starting after that is what we're really talking about. So I see that as a period of renewal and recovery. I think the trends which we can see from consumer and corporate behavior are very strong. I think we're entering into a period of roaring growth. And I don't want to get into the alphabet soup of whether it's going to be a K shape or a U shape or a W shape or a V shaped recovery. I think it's going to be a strong recovery. My personal prediction is going to be, it's going to be a K shape with the upper limb of K being more prominent. I think there is going to be a lot of creative destruction and consolidation. We're going to see the greatest M&A boom that the world has ever seen. And I think we're going to see a lot of reimagination of financial services with disintermediation of various entities, currency, with the rise of cryptocurrency, both privately as well as state-sponsored like in China, and the rise of TechFin and financial technology. We're going to see the globalization of securities markets as well. And I think all of this is going to happen in droves in the next, as I would call the next, 6 to 24 months.
Sure.
The next 20, you shouldn't see it as 2 periods of 12 months each. See it as a chunk of about 24 months.
All right, so those are the key trends. But Cyril Shroff, I must thank you for this. It has been a fascinating journey, getting so many thought leaders with their big ideas for change. Hope to see you soon with many more fresh ideas. Thank you so much.
Look forward to season 2.
Thank you. All right, so the Thought League has presented some of the most path-breaking ideas, setting the stage for a new era in the new decade. As we close this season, we will soon come back with more such valuable insights from what we call the Thought League. Thank you so much.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.